Oh, the cooling off at night is nice. I like it. Some enchanted evening. Got it. Okay. Not many mosquitoes is also good. Hi and back. Good to see you. So to the 3 college students, thank you for being here tonight. It's good to see you. What'd you say? I feel so validated in I don't know what the culture and tradition is here of starting on time, but I have to leave at 7:15, 7:14 really, so I hope we can start on time. Okay, well, I don't know if somebody's introducing this tonight. Okay, great, thanks.
Good evening. Hi, I think most of you know me. I'm Susan Solars, and I'm head of the Social Action Program. And we are very fortunate tonight to have Rabbi Michael Feshbach joining us as our rabbinic candidate. And we are going to be hearing from Rabbi on
Kindness, consequences, and consensus, making sense of a world at a time of suffering and division. So, thank you all for being here, and I'm sorry to start so promptly, but our flight is at 10:17, so we need to be in the car by 7:16, I think, headed to the airport. So we'll start. I'm going to go at a little bit of a faster pace than I might otherwise have done. But let's open on the second page with the bracha for the study of Torah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, eternal our God, sovereign of existence, who made us holy with your mitzvot and commands us to soak up or immerse ourselves in the words of Torah. I have for you tonight three things: an appetizer, a main course, and and dessert. I'm going to have to rush through the appetizer, and we'll focus on the main course, and we'll see if we get to dessert. But it's not directly a modern social justice topic. This is sort of the foundation for all social action and social justice, which is the sense of kindness, of how we treat each other, and ultimately of inclusion. To lay a historical groundwork here, you have the page with the hand on it. And I won't be able to go into great detail for this, but I came up with this background of history as an explanation and answer to two different questions. This is about the similarities and differences between Judaism and Christianity. It was meant to answer a perfectly reasonable question and a less reasonable one. And the perfectly reasonable question from a Christian is, if Jesus was Jewish, and by the way, many Christians don't quite get, even if they know Jesus was Jewish, they don't know that they don't put two and two together. Christianity is not the religion of Jesus. If Jesus was Jewish, his religion was Judaism. Christianity is the religion about Jesus, not the religion of Jesus. That's a very big difference. If Jesus was Jewish, why does Jesus play no role in the Jewish religion? This is actually a very good question. And so to answer that, I came up with this chart, but the subset of this is the less legitimate question is, why can't you be a Jew for Jesus? And this whole chart was come up to answer those two questions. I start with our common heritage. In the bottom left-hand corner is a discussion of our shared heritage of biblical or Israelite religion, and I go into 5 reasons there why Jews don't use the term Old Testament except when we do, which we don't have time for tonight. As we move up into history, the main part of this is first century Judaism. And there were different groups of Jews in the first century, and if, in fact, you wanted to use the term Jew for Jesus, you could do it then. That would have been an accurate time frame. In general, as the summation of this whole page, and if I come back here, we can go into this page the way it was meant to be done, in a little bit more time and detail. But the general answer is there is a word in the English language for somebody who follows biblical or Israelite religion until the coming of Jesus and then follows Jesus. What's the word for that? Christian. It's a perfectly good word, right? There's nothing wrong with that word. To claim that you can follow biblical religion until the coming of Jesus and then follow the Jesus branch and still be Jewish is to be on 2 fingers at the same time. So that is why I came up with this chart. That was our appetizer. I'm sorry to rush through it. What I want to spend the most time with tonight is a story from the Talmud, which is really historiography. Historiography is sort of or it's more than that. It's sort of mythology about history. It is an explanation for why things happen. Now, if I come here, one of my first High Holiday sermons may deal with the topic of that I don't think things happen for a reason. I don't. I think things happened for a reason. And we can talk about what the difference between those two statements is. So we make meaning out of the world around us. And this is one of the ways that the rabbis of the Talmud made meaning out of the tremendous blow that's the loss of the Second Temple. Our ancestors worshipped God and came close to God by killing sheep. We come close to God by reading about them killing sheep. One method is a barbecue. The other method is a book. Those are very different experiences. So the difference between the world of the Talmud after the loss of the temple and our biblical heritage, it's a big difference in worldview. But this is an explanation from the Talmud. How many of you have studied Talmud before? Okay, a couple of hands. This comes from Tractate Gittin, which has to do with giving gets, the Jewish bill of marriage divorce, except that the Talmud, the Mishnah, which is the first part of the Talmud, may be reasonably straightforward on topic. But the Gemara, which is the commentary on the Mishnah and the Gemara together make up the Talmud, goes, it's almost like stream of consciousness. If you mention that you are trying to tell the difference between black and white, and then some rabbi may come along and tell a story about every shade of black that they've ever seen, and then somebody else may come to tell a story about vision and how eyes work, and then they can talk about other body parts because you've been talking about eyes, and I mean it's so this comes from Tractate Gittin, and the Talmud, the way the Mishnah is arranged by chapter and subsection, but the Talmud is arranged by the first printed edition, and it was printed in folio pages, so the title page was 1A. So the first page of a tractate of Talmud is 1B. This comes from page 55b and 56a of Tractate Gittin of the Babylonian Talmud. If you just say the word Talmud and you don't specify, you mean the Babylonian Talmud. So if we were doing Torah study and around a table, I would divide this up and have, I understand that we're streaming, is that correct? Hello, those who are watching online. So instead of having you read, I'm going to do the reading. I did this last night. I really feel more comfortable with sharing the reading, but I'll do this now. So, Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Gittin, 55b to 56a. Because of a Kamsa and a Bar Kamsa, Jerusalem was destroyed. Okay? A certain man, whose name we never get. A certain man had a friend Kamsa, and an enemy whose name was Bar Kamsa. What do you think is going to happen? Of course, they're going to get them mixed up. That's right. He once hosted a party, and he said to his servant, go bring my friend Kamsa to the party. And what did his servant do? Servant went, but he brought Bar Kamsa instead. When the host found Bar Kamsa there, he said, You go around gossiping and telling tales about me. He's got a legitimate beef against this guy, right? Not somebody who treats him well. Say, what are you doing here? Get out. Bar Kamsa replied, Look, I'm already here. Let me stay. I'll pay you back for whatever I eat and drink. This must have been quite a party, right? But the host refused. Bar Kamsa countered, I'll give you half the cost of the entire party. I mean, really, this was the big shindig that you wanted to be at, I guess. No, the host replied. Finally, Bar Kamsa said, Look, I'll pay for the whole party. But the host still refused, and he took Bar Kamsa by the hand, and he threw him out. Hurt and embarrassed, Bar Kamsa said to himself, since the rabbis were sitting that now, this is a historical period of time, while the temple was still standing, it's not clear to me that this is historically accurate. It's not clear to me that a group called the rabbis actually existed at that time. But this is the rabbis from, who knows when this was written, a century later, 2 centuries later, reflecting back on their own role, and it's sort of a mythological reflect. Everybody get that this is sort of myth-making here, right? So Bar Kamsa said to himself, since the rabbis were sitting there and didn't stop him, this shows that they agreed with his action. By the way, what other explanation could there have been for this group of rabbis not intervening? They could, maybe they didn't notice, right? Is that what you said? They're at a party, they're distracted, right? Remember, if somebody like snubs you, it's possible it was unintentional, right? Since the rabbis were sitting there and didn't stop him, this shows they agreed with his action. If they're like that, and Bar Kamsa's Jewish, right? But if they're like that, I will go and inform against them to the Romans. So Bar Kamsa went right to the emperor. Okay, any yellow flags from that? This little pishula little Jew from like some weird province goes right to the Rome, right? Goes right to the. This is historically ridiculous, but spiritually powerful. So the emperor went to the emperor and said, "The Jews are rebelling against you." The skeptical emperor responded, "How can I tell? Jews are always quarrelsome, right? How can I tell?" Bar Kamsa responded, "Send them an offering and see if they accept it and sacrifice it on the altar of the temple." So the emperor sent Bar Kamsa to the rabbis, to the temple, with a fine calf. But on the way, Bar Kamsa makes a blemish on the animal in a place where Jews would consider the animal ritually unfit, but would have met the standards of Roman slaughter. The rabbis were inclined to accept the offering anyway. Why? What do they know is going to happen if they refuse the offering? They're going to be viewed as being in rebellion against Rome. Is this a minor thing? No. The rabbis, sometimes, sometimes, if we had more time, I'd give other examples of sometimes power is power. The rabbis were inclined to accept the offering anyway. But Rabbi Zechariah ben Abkulas, what a troublesome guy, said, "What? If we do this, people will say it's okay to offer blemished animals on the, right? Is he technically correct? Absolutely. So they refused the offering, knowing that word would get back to the emperor, and it would appear that they were in rebellion. Serious stuff. Serious stuff, life and death consequences. And I want you to think of what they know the consequences are going to be before we read the next paragraph, because the next paragraph could be considered kind of shocking. It's not shocking if you read tweets and social media posts, in today's world, because people are happy that other people are dead all the time. But this is shocking to me. To save lives, wondering how to deal with the traitor, the rabbis then proposed to, how are you going to stop Bar Kamsa? They proposed to kill him. Is he a traitor? Yeah, he's a troublemaking traitor. He caused this rift, right? The rabbis then proposed to kill Bar Kamsa before he went back to inform against them. But who is it who's standing up? He's always technically correct. Rabbi Zechariah ben Abkula said, "What? Is the penalty for making a blemish on a consecrated animal the death penalty? No, it's a fine. Can't kill somebody for making a... Is he technically correct? Once again, he's technically correct. Forest and trees." Rabbi Yochanan then remarked, "Through the scrupulousness of Rabbi Zechariah ben Abkula, our house has been destroyed, our temple burnt, and we ourselves exiled from our land." Okay, before you turn the page over? Comments or questions? Reactions?
Why do you think that the rabbis told this story or made this story up?
Good question. Others?
Why did this one rabbi have so much power and the others didn't pull the right?
Also a good question. Right? Yes.
What precludes them from sending an envoy of their own to say, hey, we couldn't do this animal, but we could do another?
Outstanding question. You're right. In other words, we know the end result, and the temple is being destroyed, and has been destroyed, and the rabbis later on are trying to make sense out of what happened. You can turn this over. But by the way, in Jewish tradition, it says already in an earlier space, it says the first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians in the year 586 before the Common Era because of Avodah Zarah, because of idolatry. The second temple was destroyed, our tradition says, because of sinat chinam, because of internal strife, hatred, needless hatred, how we treat each other. And, if you go back to my first page, the reason I included it was, look at all those different groups of Jews competing for their own purposes in the first century. This is an accurate reflection of a very fractured, sectarian time where people belong to different groups and were not getting along with each other. So, leading back to the question of your question, which I dodged a minute ago, who comes across well in this story? Well, the irony is, if the rabbis wrote this story, the irony is the only one who comes across even remotely decently here is the Roman emperor. He's like, how do I tell? Let's check this out. Let's investigate, right? I'm not saying he comes across well, but he comes across better than anyone else, right? Who's the hero of this story, right? What would you do in this situation? Yes. Why didn't they invoke the principle of pikuach nefesh, which says that you're allowed to violate any law in Judaism except for 3 in order to save a life? And I think because this is not about what happened, this is not a story that happened, but a story that's trying to explain what they already knew the end result was. So I think it's not an actual historical debate that took place, but it obviously invites the question, okay, he's being technically correct, but the consequences are so great that, and I think the comment at the end sort of is getting at that a little, because of this technical scrupule. In other words, why did he have so much power, was the other question. Why did they, right? Given that this is written by rabbis, ultimately about rabbis to some degree, this is a self-critique. It's a self-critique about taking the rules, so, not seeing the forest for the trees. Yes?
That's what I'm going to say. It seems to be about rigidity all the way through, including the guy with the 2.
The host, right? Bar Kamsa. The emperor being more flexible, I guess, again, and then the rabbis. This is about the danger of rigidity, I think, is certainly possible. So, is morality about intent or impact? You can think about that. I don't know if we have time. How much does kindness count? I think that's a great deal about what this story is about. How we treat each other. What is this text trying to teach about history? I'm not sure that it's accurate about history, but it's certainly about the notion that core values in how we treat each other affects our fate. If you wanted to put it a different way, the claim here, and whether you believe this or not, or how you believe it, is that our faith in how we behave, what our values are, affects our fate. What does this say about how we greet each other and how we treat each other? I mean, look, the guy had a legitimate beef against Bar Kamsa, but I mean, I would have stopped at half the cost of the party. Sure, that sounds great. I don't know. You know, maybe I'd be too, maybe personally I'd be too embarrassed to throw somebody out, and I would have let him stay even before he made these offers. I don't know. How about you? You ever had to be in a social function with somebody that you had real problems with? Who hasn't? Who hasn't had that experience? Okay. How do we deal with dissent and disagreement? I'm touching on that. What's the role of rules? When is it all right to bend or break the rules? And other comments or questions. So I'm now, that was the main course. I'm rushing. I'm sorry I'm rushing. But I want to get to dessert. So some of you college students said you go to Hillel, but you don't go to Shammai, right? Although I will say that for a while at Brandeis University, the Reform group of Reform Jewish students called itself Shammai. That's a little problematic. That was just being provocative because when you realize who Shammai is. Let's turn to the back page here. Because here, I think, is a good lesson in dessert for an age of dissension, division. This is a really important, and you need some math skills for this in a minute. But I'll read the opening paragraph first. Rabbi Abba said that Shmuel said, for 3 years, the followers of Rabbi Shammai, Beit Shammai, and the followers of Rabbi Hillel, Beit Hillel, disagreed. These said halakha is in accordance with our opinion, and these said the halakha is in accordance with our opinion. Ultimately, a divine voice, a bat kol, emerges and proclaims, these and these are the words of the living God. So, you know, by the way, there is another instance in the Talmud where the rabbis are having a debate, and Eliezer has an opinion, and all the other rabbis, like 5 rabbis, disagree with Eliezer. And Eliezer tries all kinds of things to prove his point. And finally, a voice from heaven intervenes and says, why are you disagreeing with Eliezer? He's always right. God intervenes. And what's the response? Okay, so now it's 5-2. Right? That's a more complicated story, which we can go into another time. That's a very important story called the Oven of Achnai, and reflects a rabbinic self-awareness that they were changing Judaism and that the power to do so was in their hands. That's a tremendous text about the assertion of power. But here, a divine voice comes in and proclaims, these and these are the words of the living God. They're both right. But halakha is in accordance with Beit Hillel. Now, we're going to come back to that phrase in a minute. But I want to go to the second paragraph for a minute because it's an explanation. The Gemara asks, since both these and these are the words of the living God, why was Beit Hillel privileged to have the halakha, Jewish law, established in accordance with their option? The reason is that they were agreeable and forbearing, showing restraint when affronted, and when they taught Jewish law, they would teach their own statements and the statements of Beit Shammai. They'd quote both. Moreover, when they formulated their teachings and cited a dispute, they put the teachings of Beit Shammai ahead of their own statements in deference to Beit Shammai. I'm not convinced by that last sentence. Why would they mention their opponent's arguments first? In order to knock them down, right? So I'm totally unconvinced by but ignore that. Let's go back for the moment to this startling comment, these and these are the words of the living God. The tradition usually interprets this and says they're both right. The problem I have with that is, well, one says go east and the other says go west. And the tradition says, well, Elijah the prophet will come and someday explain how those are both the same thing. I suppose you can say, if the world is round, that when you go east and I go west, they'll meet and eventually meet up. Okay, one says kosher and the other says treif. That's not so easy as having a round world that you go all the way around the world, right? One says do this, the other says do that. They're not compatible. it, it, it's, they can't both be right. That can't just be a matter of our own lack of understanding, which is what the Elijah interpretation of this passage is. Oh, Elijah will show us how our perspective is so limited that from a larger perspective, we'll see how these are the same thing. They can't both be right. We live at a time of a lot of argument. We live at a time when your worldview is affected by which TV show you watch, which TV station. We live at a time when we are not seeing things on the same page. Any of you mathematicians? Any of you like math? Any of you heard of math? Okay. So let's go back to the phrase, these and these are the words of the living God. Tradition usually interprets this to mean they're both right, we just don't understand how they're both right. Maybe that's correct in some instances, and that's kind of cool. But in a lot of ways, they can't both be right. I attribute this next teaching to Alec Isaacs of the Shalom Hartman Institute, who said, in math, if you have a series of things to do and you put brackets around one of them, what does that mean? Do that formula first. No. These and these are the words of the living God. I want you to put brackets in your mind around the words these and these. How does that change the meaning? Not these and these are the words of the living God, but these and these are the words of the living God. In other words, it's not the result. It's the argument itself. It's the search for truth. It's the search for meaning. It's not what they say in the end. It's the fact that they're trying to figure out what God wants. Do you see how that changes the meaning? That is an important thing to remember at a time of great debate about how we're all, we hope, looking for truth, even if we don't see it in the same way. We are going to leave very shortly to catch a plane, but I think I have a couple minutes for comments, questions, reactions, or to blow up the internet with our stream. So, any thoughts, any reactions? I went through this very fast. Was it too fast? Yeah, a couple people are saying yes. But I'm sorry if it was too fast. If I come back, we can take it slower another time, and I can certainly do more of the first page because we really skipped over the appetizer. Any comments or reactions?
I appreciate your perspective.
Well, then you've learned the lesson of the last of the last page. Great, but thank you. It doesn't mean don't argue passionately for what you believe in. It means that remember that somebody arguing passionately who doesn't agree with you is searching for truth also. So, thank you. There was another comment. Please come back for the appetizer. That's in your hands. But thank you. Any other comments or questions?
For today, for the period of time we're living in, with all this argumentation and dissension and polarization, what does this look like?
How does it help?
Well, what does this look like? It's just, well, I think maybe you just answered my question before I even asked it. You said we have to know what the people have been doing.
I'll give you an example where I'm going to be far too specific. What does this look like? Jewish tradition commands us to care for the poor, to welcome the stranger. 36 times in the Torah, know the stranger, help, because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. To defend those who are defenseless, to lift up those, to shelter those who need it. If your passion is for helping the poor, and you really think that the way to do so is to cut taxes on the wealthy so that they will create more jobs and that will lift everybody, that's a Jewish point of view. If your motive is to help the poor. If you really believe that giving aid to the poor so that they can have a cushion is the way to do so, then that's a Jewish position. If your motive is to help, if you're truly passionate about lifting everyone up, then how you do it is kosher. God's not a Democrat. God's not a Republican. God cares about how we treat each other according to our tradition. So that's far more specific than I intended to be, and far more dangerous ground. But I actually believe that. Other comments? Get me out of trouble, please, somebody. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you for your thoughtfulness and for your willingness to just be yourself with us, and that we appreciate it so very much.
It's an honor to be here with this holy community, and may you find it to be truly a Beit Shalom, a house of peace. Thank you.